Hi, everyone. Authentic relationships can be your greatest business asset. But if you have not fully tapped into that and have not been strategic with it, this episode is for you. Today on Strategy Talks, I'm going to talk to Jillian Vorce. She's a master connector and the founder of the Jillian Group. And we're going to explore relationship building as a strategy. Now, she and I were talking in the green room, and this is going to be one that you don't want to miss. This is Strategy Talks. I'll be right back.
Let's strategize together. Let's hear it from an expert. Join the conversation, it's informative and free. You and me, let's talk some strategy. Now here's your host, Morin-van.
Hey everyone, my name is Doreen and I am back with another episode of Strategy Talks, season 4 episode, I don't know, 100 something, 40, 50, I don't know. Anyway, I'm here today with a good friend of mine and I'm very excited to talk about relationship building. But before I do, I want to make sure that you are welcomed. If you're watching this live with us on Facebook or LinkedIn or YouTube, let us know that you are and where you're joining us from, and let us know in the comments that you're here live. If you're watching the replay, put hashtag replay in the comments so that my guests and myself can maybe see your questions. And last but not least, we know that many of you listen to Strategy Talks as a podcast, and I want to welcome you if you're listening in today. So without much further ado, I'm going to bring onto the stage with me my friend Jillian. Jillian, how are you today?
I am well, Doreen. It's really nice to see you. Finally, here we are.
I know. I know. Well, I kind of teased this a little bit, but in the back room, we were reminiscing about when we first met, and it all
Mhm,
came through me watching your TED Talk that you did about 12 years ago and
mhm.
talking about connection and the lens that you use. And I was sharing with you that you made a profound impact on me and my networking and relationship building skills. We met at Social Media Marketing World 2017, where
Mhm.
you were the networking coordinator and I was on the volunteer networking group. And you taught us as a group how to network with the people that were coming in as volunteers. And we were the networking team. And you're teaching us how to take care of ourselves, but also
Mhm.
look at what people needed and then look at the overall goals of the conference. It was really
Mhm.
amazing. And I always admired you for that. And then watching your TED Talk really kind of put it all together. I was like, of course she did. So let's talk
Yeah.
about that. And then once we've talked about TED Talk, let's talk about what's changed since then, right? So the
Hmm.
TED Talk's called Connectivity Through, no,
The
Re-
yeah, the lens of connectivity.
yes, yes,
Yeah,
it's the other way
exactly.
around. So tell me a
Yeah.
little bit about that, how that came about, and what's come out of it and how that has changed.
Okay. For a moment, before I do, I have to also acknowledge how you stood out to me when we met in 2017, specifically because of our conversation, but because of the leave behind. If I'm not mistaken, you left a nice, like, postcard kind of behind with your branding on it and just a handwritten comment about meeting me.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if you remember this, but I'm almost certain I remember this correctly, that was from you.
Yes.
And so that made an impression on me as well. So I just wanted you to know that it's a two-way street here. So,
Thanks.
okay. So now following up with your question. So the TEDx, yeah, that was a phenomenal opportunity. So a couple things about it. The first thing I'll say is that is an opportunity that came to me directly through relationships. And so just for a moment, I'll try to just kind of quick brushstroke to explain what happened in a condensed version here. So at the time, I was on a board. I think I was chairing a board, or I was on a board with a nonprofit, and we brought in an outside professional consultant, a strategic planning consultant. And so he came in. He came very highly recommended. Had been in practicing for 30 years, and I was really enamored by what he was delivering and what he was talking about. And so afterwards, he came over to me and he said, Jillian, you were almost distracting by how much you were paying attention to me. Like, I was distracted because you were like listening to every single word. And he said, I'm automatically interested in wanting to get to know you more. So we decided to meet for coffee. And so I'll just flag that. So he had been, a professional consultant for 30 years. At this point in my career, I was maybe, I don't know, 25 or 30 or something like this, right? So we met for coffee and we chatted and kind of got to know each other a little bit. And then kind of moved on. So I don't know, it's like a few weeks or a couple months later, not too long later, I get an email from him and he says, Jillian, I think you should do a TEDx talk. I know the producer who's doing one in the local, Boston area. And I already told her that I have somebody that should be included. And so you're going to be getting an email from her. So I got a TEDx opportunity like in my inbox kind of a thing. And so then long story short, it was happening in 3 weeks and I had no TED talk prepared whatsoever, nothing. So in any case, I was like shocked. I got on the phone with this woman and tried to figure out, great, what am I going to talk about? Who am I? What do I do? What do I believe? And so around that time, I was at a coffee shop, kind of reflecting, thinking and whatnot. And there happened to be a gentleman sitting at a table kind of near me. He was sitting by himself and he had an iPad or something. And again, this is like circa 2012 or 13 or whatever we said. Yeah. And I just commented about his iPad and how hip he was using an iPad or something. And so we got to chatting and he's like, why don't we sit together and chat? And so we did. And I told him, I was trying to figure out what to do my TED talk on. And so we were talking and about what we had done and where we had gone. And I had just recently returned from my trip to Thailand. And so I was relaying that story. And he said, I think that's what your your TED talk should be about that. So I was like, oh, amazing. And so fortunately, that gentleman, George, also became a really good friend of mine. I didn't know that he was a very successful attorney. We'll leave it at that for now. I had no idea who he was, but he became a really good friend of mine and is to this day. But then there I was on stage 3 weeks later delivering the lens of connectivity. So
that's an incredible story. I love that. So thinking about that story, and for those of you who are watching, listening, I'm going to link to her TED Talk, of course, so you can watch it. It's short. It's like 10, 11 minutes.
Yeah.
But I want to take us through, so where you were then and where we are now in 2025. Is it harder to connect? Is it easier to make connection? Are people more standoffish? What are you seeing? Is it still that same lens, or has the lens fogged up, dirty it? What are we seeing? What are you seeing?
I think it's become increasingly important, actually, especially as technology continues to, charge ahead kind of at lightning speed. I think that more so now than maybe ever, the power of relationships is the great equalizer. And it's ultimately what the thing that we as human beings want and need is each other, is to feel heard, to have the opportunity to help each other, all of these things. So one of the kind of title. So my title is, of course, Chief Handshaker, but it was either that or professional human being, because in many ways, I think this idea or this concept or a kind of way of being, of showing up and being open and paying attention to other people, like making eye contact and listening to them. And all of these things are things that we ought to be able to do as human beings, kind of a thing. So I think the answer to your question, I think it's more relevant now than ever. How it has evolved is interesting. So relationships, for me, the reason I got started with relationships is because I started my first business when I was 21 or 22 or something. I had met Robert Kiyosaki, who wrote the Cash Flow Quadrant and Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And it was just like kind of a catalyst for me that moment, talking with him and beginning to understand that business ownership was an option for me. So I started a company and then realized, pretty much everybody in the business world was 20 or 30 years older than me and generally male. So there I was at, 22 years old. I learned quickly that, to be humble and to kind of listen. So I began asking questions and kind of connecting people. Ultimately, at first I thought everybody knows everything and everyone except for me. And I soon realized it wasn't the case. So I started making introductions. And then over time that began to compound. And ultimately that, that pool, that network of relationships is, I think of as my body of work. And it's what has fed me all of the business I've done in my career, right? Which is good and bad, but there's a lot of benefit. I'm really fortunate to have had this experience. But what I have found is, so I have a lot of what I think of as legacy relationships that go back many years. I also have people that will reach out because we met at, in line at Starbucks 10 years ago. And and let's chat, or these things. So these, the seeds that I planted 20 years ago continue to, to bloom today. And some of them are, oak trees, and others are just little bitty crocuses I see every once in a while, But fast forward, moving to, I moved to Europe during COVID, 2021. And for me, it was probably the most humbling experience of my life, for sure. And I, kind of came out of the COVID cave, so to speak, on the other side of the ocean, right? And so I had one contact here actually, and that was it. And so and it wasn't in Amsterdam where I live. So I had to, start from scratch, literally one handshake at a time. So I bring that up to try to punctuate this long-winded answer to your question. What I have found is, believe it or not, people are people, right? We have different cultures and all these other things, and all these different ways to segment ourselves and whatnot. But what I have found at the end of the day is people are people, because I was quite worried about it. If I wondered if I would translate here to Europe or to this, to the Dutch market. But I kept showing up and doing what I did when I was in my early 20s, and showing up to listen, and showing up to learn and to connect with others. And after doing that for about 18 months, I started having opportunities come to me, which is the same thing that happened 20 something years ago. So for me, all these new technologies and all of these things that we can do today only make, the ability for us to connect better and stronger, and also the need for us to do it even greater.
Oh, that's awesome. And I love that you have that visual of, like all those seeds 20 years ago, or oak tree. So that actually was going to be my next question. So you now, under the Jillian Group, you have several different programs. And, if I am a business owner and I want to work with you, how would you explain the ROI of this strategic relationship building? I guess you demonstrated in your life,
Yeah,
obviously,
sure.
which you just said. But how can you, how can you measure that ROI? I mean, it's easier with the sales team, I would imagine. Might be a little bit harder with other teams or even stakeholders. What would your answer be there if somebody says, well, I don't know about investing in relationship building strategies?
Sure. Oh, I have so much to say on this. Let me see if I can remember all of it to pack it in here. Okay, so my first answer is, it's really, it's also kind of, it's a way to have a sustainable business. So when we want to think about return, I also suggest that we think about longevity. And can we maintain what we're doing in business? And so for me, the more congruent we are with our business, and whatever our career even, but we'll say business, the more congruent we are with our business, which includes with the relationships, the more sustainable it's going to be. Because I could tell you, or you could learn from any number of, expert gurus about some XYZ tactic to, 10x your customers and all of these things. But if it doesn't really feel like you, if it doesn't sit right with you, it's going to drain energy probably. It could lead to burnout. It's just not going to lead to consistency and ultimately not sustainable. So that could be, their numbers and the sales pages could talk about all this great, ROI data. But if it doesn't match with who you are and what your values are about, then it maybe is not for you. And so kind of operating or building a business with this focus of being relationship driven is not for everyone. But I think it ought to be, because
Right.
it's, to me, the most sustainable way to build a career or business. And I think I'll just quickly dovetail for a moment what I mentioned earlier. And this is one of the learnings that I've had over the years and why I said that having, 100% of my business coming to me through, inbound, right, referrals, et cetera, over the past almost 25 years has been a giant blessing. But it also comes with a price tag, because you don't have as much control per se over when new business is going to come in. So it's great to receive referrals, but and also it's led me to be somewhat reactive in some ways as opposed to being proactive. So this is one of the biggest shifts that I've made, which goes back to what the Jillian Group is about. And so I'm going to try to answer that and also stick to the ROI piece. Let's see how I do. The most recent iteration of the Jillian Group is that I am no longer doing B2B consulting. So I had been doing that for a lot of years. I built a team of 40 people and built a business that carried on for many years, had clients under retainer for 4 years on average. And that was great. That was great while it was. But in any case, so I have gone through different iterations over the years. And so presently the Jillian Group is what it always was intended to be. I just had to take the scenic route to get there, which is a collection of ventures and strategic services that I offer. So I always have consulted with and advised founders and executive teams, et cetera. But I also love to work with, like, the way I see it is I like to work with, it sounds so cliche, but good people that are doing things that make a difference and are going about it in a way that is responsible. So these are the people that I love to work with. Going back to the ROI piece, I think the last piece I'll say for now, because for sure you just struck one and I could just riff on this all day. But to try to put a bow on this part of the conversation, one of the best kind of discoveries, so to speak, or creations, or I'm not really sure what word to use for, but what I have observed over the years in working with and advising, I don't know how many companies in all different industries, from healthcare to tech to finance, startups, established companies, big, small, you name it. Most all of the time, what they're looking for always comes across as the same. They use different language, but it's, we need growth. We need more customers. We're always looking for more customers. And so I saw that and again and again and again. But ultimately, what I realized after starting to work with them is most of the time, they didn't really have a customer acquisition problem. They had, sales processes problems. They had team issues, the wrong people in the wrong place. So kind of talent allocation issues, leadership challenges, focusing on the wrong thing. And for many of them, there was like this continuous, it's like the idea when you're a hammer, you see everyone as a nail. So often companies focusing on this type of customer, and I understand you need to know your ICP and all these things. But in my experience, there are so many other relationships that are around the perimeter or circumference of our business that many people or, business owners never think about and never really do anything with. At best, it's often ad hoc. And so there's a framework that I created over a lot of years called 10 Vital Business Relationships. And so this is what I would recommend for any business owners or people that are either getting started. It's also applicable to people who have teams that are working in a corporate structure. It's flexible enough that you can apply it to whatever your business or organization is about. And it's basically to map out the ecosystem of your business, but more so than the conventional stakeholder mapping, it's really looking at the relationships around the business. And through that lens, you're able to look for what other opportunities exist. And this is where you can develop all kinds of partnerships and other ways to help grow your brand or build a business that gets us out of the transactional slick ad copy to try to just get this one customer and et cetera. So
yeah, so I actually have that. I have these 10 listed because I was very curious. And I went to your website and you talk about strategic partnerships, community, employees, team, customers, prospects, competitors, media, leadership, suppliers, and environment. And so I love all of that, and it totally makes sense. I want to dive into the environment piece because I know we just talked about sustainability. So let's talk about that as a lens to look through to build relationships.
Sure. So a quick note about the sustainability piece, because I've gathered that word can mean different things to different people. So I just want to make a quick footnote here that when I say sustainability, I mean sustainable business practices, like things it's like longevity, but I also mean doing things that are not going to exploit people or the planet. So for me, it's yes and. So I just wanted to call that out. So this is my kind of worldview and where we're at as business people and having a responsibility to at least consider the sustainable side of our business. So I just wanted to call that out. But now the environmental side. So that's probably, makes sense to continue. So I think, oh boy, there's a lot here. So as I was mentioning, I believe that all of us as business people have a responsibility, as do we as consumers, I think. But as business people, we need to become better educated about, what are the intended and unintended consequences of our business. So what things are we doing? How are we adding value? And how are we possibly negatively affecting the people around us, et cetera, our communities or the environment, et cetera. So I think being able to look through that lens is a good starting point. And then what opportunities emerge. So that can be things like just beginning to look at, it's like a lot of crossover with other areas, like with the employees and whatnot. But how are do you have a brick and mortar or an office? So do people come to you? And if so, why? Is that necessary? How are they getting to you? How about your customers? Like how are you interacting with them? Again, is it physical or is it digital? But then what type of materials are you using and why? And it's not to say that every business needs to become, tree huggers and not everybody's going to save the planet and all of these things. But there is a difference between at least having some basic awareness about what are we buying, what type of materials, what type of vendors are we buying from, what are we doing, are we, what type of waste are we creating, including, electronic waste. So what kind of waste are we contributing to, and then how do our current and future customers view that? Increasingly, customers are paying attention to brands that are also paying attention. And so this, I think of, it's kind of like embracing sustainability as a value proposition almost. But ultimately, I think it is also a responsibility.
Wow. That's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, sorry. Next question.
No, it's fantastic. And I love that I love that you're one of those authentic business owners who practices what they preach, right? I think that is part of that sustainability, right? You pretend to be somebody who you're not for about a minute and people see right through you.
Right.
And people do that all the time. I mean, I'm in marketing. I'm going to call it out because we are fixing other people's problems all the time. I see agencies who take on clients they shouldn't, and then they come to other clients. They've spent, I just talked to somebody who spent $90,000 a month for several months on ads, and their return on investment was 5,000. They went with somebody else that I know that told the story. They're spending 12,000 on ads, but they're getting 90,000 return on investment. So
Mhm.
flipping that script and that responsibility is, that sustainability of business relationship is when
Yes.
people trust you, but then you also are trustworthy. So I absolutely love that we just talked about that. And I'm looking at the clock, Jillian, we're at 25
Oh,
minutes. So
oh,
I have something that I want to ask you, right?
sure.
You have a podcast, One Handshake podcast. You
Yes.
spotlight guests reinventing themselves through connection. I'm going to ask you if there's one moment, whether it was seemingly minor or a big relationship, that led to an unexpectedly large business pivot for you. And if that's something that you might not have looked for, but that's what happened, maybe it was the TEDx one that you talked about. If there's another one that you can say, wow, this was just an unexpected, connection that led to this moment that, was really, really, because I think a lot of us are out in the world and we, oh, this is a story. I don't even know I should tell. I should. I was networking recently and I was at a event that was about, I'm in Vermont, that was about
Mhm.
sustainability and the environment. And
Mhm.
some woman came up to me and asked me what I did. And when I told her I was a social media strategy, she said, "Oh, no offense, but I'm going to move on because you don't have anything to offer. I'm
Mhm.
looking for a certain person." And I was like, wow,
Mhm.
that had never happened to me. And I was like, you have no idea how
Mhm.
connected I am in
Right.
Vermont, in the US,
Right.
how I've been in business for 14 years. You literally just judged me on my title. That was unbelievable. So let's put it in your hands. Has there been a defining moment or this chance meeting or something that you were like, wow, this has really pivoted my business?
So I will just say for a moment, unfortunately, that happens all the time, that we judge each other, and we automatically assume, and often it's in seconds. I often talk about Malcolm Gladwell's book Blink, and oftentimes it's like we don't even think about it. It's kind of subconsciously. We decide when we're meeting people who are the important people and who aren't, and we qualify and disqualify people. And so it's really unfortunate when we experience it, but again, we can't control what other people do. We can more so control ourselves. So the takeaway there is to also, I encourage people to just notice when we do that ourselves,
Yeah.
and to begin to learn to do it differently. Because I always will say this, like I've had, I so many experiences with this over my career of like simple things like being part of an event at a hotel or something typical, right? But paying attention to the staff that are setting up the room and how easy it is to overlook them because they're just the staff setting up the room. But just by simply getting to know them by name and smiling at them, I've had things like they bring over a whole round of drinks or desserts or whatever for everybody at the table that I'm with. And they'll say, "This is because you're sitting with Jillian." And people are like, "How did you get this?" Like, because this kind of thing, because people want to be seen as human beings and pay attention to who they are. And when you treat them, they're often excited to be able to do things like this. And so there's a lot of that. I mean, I have so many examples where being able to build trust and connection, even through nonverbal communication, has landed me at the front of lines or access to places that there's no more room, no capacity, and in all kinds of conversations with founders and business people and things down in Washington, D.C. with politicians and things in Hollywood. And I mean, I have a million examples. I don't even know how to pick one. But I think what I would say to that is my last point here is that it reminds me of like this idea of like networking and building relationships and whatnot, and how often people want to talk about the tactics and what to do. And I always push back and say, it's not what to do, it's how to think. Because if we begin to think differently and seeing things like looking at like having patience and being curious, and being creative, and kind of showing up in this way, people will feel it. And these are the ways that opportunities present themselves over the long term, not when we're trying to force it or create it. It's really allowing, other people the space to be and kind of co-creating these opportunities. But so I can't give you.
That's okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
It's as you're talking, I thought back to when our young adult children, they left a coop, and this is something that my husband does really well. He's a big relationship builder, and he gave that to our children as they were
Mm,
leaving. And he said, look at every person,
mhm,
the receptionist, everybody, when you walk into the room, and acknowledge everybody and
mhm.
have conversations with the people behind the scenes. So if you're watching this and you're a parent of younger children or even a young adults, this is also something that you should model for them and give them that and tell them your stories of, just like Jillian just did, of opportunities arising because you recognized and you acknowledge people in the room. I think it's huge. Now, Jillian, where can people meet you online? Where are you most active? We're at the end. I feel like I could
Yeah,
talk for another hour,
I know.
but we're not going to. And I just absolutely love that. There were some people here live. Mike was here. Kristen was here. They're watching this. I know lots more people will watch this on the replay, but they probably want to connect with you, Jillian. Where can they find you?
Sure. So LinkedIn is the place that I spend probably the most time. So certainly, and I'm the only person in the world apparently with my name, so it should be easy to find.
Great.
So there, and then as you mentioned, the JillianGroup.com is my like main website that houses all the other projects and ventures that I have. Podcast wise, I do have the One Handshake podcast, which is an extension of the community as well. So we could check out, my podcast. So any of those places would be great.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here today. And if you've learned anything from Jillian today, put on that new lens, do a lot more listening and watching, and recognize people in the room and start conversations. You never know where it leads you. Jillian, that's what happened to us. We were thrown into
Yes.
a room and we got to meet each other, and you've made a huge impact on me and my business. And so I love that you're here today talking. And of course, for those of you who've picked up on this, Jillian is living in my home country in the
Yes.
Netherlands, which was another awesome opportunity to meet back up in Amsterdam a couple of years ago. And
Yes.
that was just a lovely way to kind of come full circle. And I know
Hmm.
that we'll meet again one
For
of those
sure.
times to come and visit. But
Sure.
thank you so much for being with us today, Jillian. And I'll be back next week with another episode of Strategy Talks. Bye, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you.